Yo, what is up? Welcome to Ninja Geek Games. What do we do when a catastrophic event destroys the land and scares off all the animals? Well, aside from having a spirit send your villagers on a pilgrimage to gain precious resources to develop an ecosystem, we do this within an immensely psychedelic forest that looks as though we've dropped some acid, so I've been told. Arborea from Alley Cat Games is a worker placement where you need to heal the land and invite whimsical creatures into your ecosystem to earn regeneration points. Arborea boasts shared resources, puzzle elements, a novel action selection mechanic, and not to mention some of the most vivid and colourful components in any game within my collection. Alley Cat Games have produced some enjoyable games for me, such as the simplistic Catstronauts or Rome in a Day, real-time space battles with starfighters, and the somewhat themeless but surprisingly good Autobahn that has a fantastic solo mode. Therefore, I was looking forward to play Arborea, especially because I was intrigued with the worker placement mechanic and the vast ways you can score regeneration or victory points. Arborea is played over a number of rounds, where players take turns placing or advancing villagers, which are your workers, and activating them, completing ecosystems, and updating resource tracks to earn immediate regeneration points. As we'll see, there's a little push your luck where you can decide to spend resources to claim ecosystem cards required for endgame points, or leave them for immediate gain, but they could be spent by other players. When villagers are placed onto the board, they will gradually move along a pilgrimage track, where the further they move, the more rewarding the actions, although this can take time. So we can already see there's a lot of decisions needing to be made. Depending on the route your workers take for their actions, you can also build a neat little engine by opening up rewards from sages that provide a number of selectable bonus actions. Let's take a look. At first glance, the board appears an eyesore and very busy, so let me take you through it. In the centre, you have 4 pilgrimage tracks that will house workers. Each of these tracks splits into one of 2 zones that contain trails and icons, and it's these icons that are the actions that you get to take. Each zone also has a sage providing varied bonus actions and the number of these that you can activate at any time. At the top of the board we have the equivalent of a round tracker and the borderlands where you'll be collecting creatures for your ecosystem, and these are represented by some pretty awesome looking meeples. At the bottom there's a biome track that indicates the volume of the 6 resources in the game that shows both the level of the resources and the regeneration points claimed if not spent. The season track provides an endgame regeneration point multiplier based on the state of your game if you've met certain requirements, and these will change every play. Lastly, this is the spirit track that also provides endgame points, but these can also be spent to boost actions during play. Player boards in comparison are pretty basic. There are areas to store claimed and developed ecosystem cards, and the board itself has sections holding 3 different types of workers: young, veterans and elders. The cubes are used to record which sage location you've activated, and these spaces are pens for collected creatures. Yes, it's busy and can burn your eyes if you're not careful, and the board seems a spaghetti map of trails and icons, but everything does fall into place very quickly. Most of the icons on the trails relate to resources, and the others are for taking ecosystem cards, gaining more workers, or associated with the various sages. I think people are going to love or hate the board, and this may put them off the game, but I quite like it. It's certainly not as complex as it appears, and everything is readable as an icon, so no text, which does mean you have to familiarise yourself with the rulebook glossary often, at least for your first few games. Gameplay is pretty simplistic. It starts off as a slow burner, and it's the execution of when to release workers for actions that becomes the critical part of the game. You can either place workers on pilgrimage tracks to load the board with workers, or move them onto the action trails. Doing the latter allows you to walk the workers down the trail, carrying out all the action icons along the way. You can then spend resources to develop ecosystem cards that will ultimately be laid out in a pattern of your choosing, where you'll earn endgame points for the location and position of creatures that you've placed in these habitats. You'll have access to a limited supply of workers each turn. The large elder meeples always find their way back to the available worker areas, but for the veterans and younglings, once used you'll need to find ways to retrain them so they become available again. During your turn, you can place available workers onto pilgrimage tracks or move these tracks along. Spending spirit points lets you do this multiple times, but should be used with caution as you can be in the red at the end of the game. If you place a worker on a season icon, you get to move your token up that track that again provides more points based on the number of times you've met this requirement, and these tokens will vary with each game. Now, anytime these tracks move, regardless of when or whose turn it is, all players can choose to move their workers off the track onto any adjacent trail or the ones they've already passed. But only the active player can carry out the trail actions on their turn. This means they can move their worker one space at a time, gaining a bonus action at each step until it reaches the end of the track where it's returned to the player board. Again, you can only do this a limited number of times, but can activate a third worker by spending more spirit points, which is a little risky. Any resource icon increases its value on the biome track. You can gain spirit points, claim ecosystem cards, or attract a creature. This means taking the matching meeple and placing it in the borderlands, claiming any bonus, which could be spirit or victory points, or a bonus tile that's randomly selected at the start of the game. This action is actually the timer for the game and causes the sun token to move closer to the last spot on the track, so you're never truly sure when the game will end. Some of these actions also allow you to take one of these creatures and store it in a pen on your player board for later use. If you want to activate a Sage ability, you'll need to have already gifted them with your tokens. The more times you gift, the more actions you can use from those presented by the Sage. Note that every track in the game has an icon to claim this bonus, so it does encourage players to get at least one gift in early. If you have any ecosystem cards in your play area, you can spend the required resources to flip the card to the habitat side, and these also give a bonus for completion. As play continues, you'll start stacking cards, creating unique layouts where you can then place creatures from your pen into the habitats. Every creature has a specific requirement to its favoured habitat or location, and here it's a game of efficiency, trying to match these requirements, which can be quite tricky but is a fun part of the game. Any unspent resources may provide immediate regeneration points. This is quite satisfying, where you move the bottom half of the resource token up to meet its top half and claim the shown points from all regeneration icons that you move through, and this is carried out for every resource. Selection of worker type at the start of your turn is important for two reasons. Firstly, the larger elder workers don't need training. Once moved off the main board, they are always available for later use. However, the veterans and younglings go to a holding area where you need to activate this icon to train them to make them available. Also, at the end of the round, you'll move every pilgrimage track a number of spaces that is dependent on the number and type of workers on that track, with veterans moving further. Just like at the beginning of your turn, any time a track moves, all players can decide to have their workers hop off onto a trail. Perhaps this may save you an action later. A lot to take in, but the game is actually quite structured. Do you move a track or place workers, and perhaps spend spirit points to do this again? If you're savvy, you can look to have your workers jump off a track in another player's turn, or maybe you want to place your worker on a specific track to move your token up the season track because your game is leading you to meet the requirements of the season token bonus. I really like the puzzle element of collecting creatures and laying out ecosystem cards for them to sit on. You may have to plan your turns accordingly, allowing you to first get the required creature onto the main board and then into your pen in one turn, providing some hefty bonuses along the way. But remember, doing the former moves the sun token towards the end of the game, and so this can come about quite suddenly, which can be disappointing. However, there are always 2 extra rounds when this occurs, allowing you to mop up if needed. The biome track is also a nice element in the game, being able to provide resources or regeneration points. Sometimes you can be left with absolutely nothing, which is frustrating when other players have a load of resources to spend, but at other times you can be swimming in points, so it does balance over the course of a game. The whole board and components have a quirky design, and I do feel this will result in gamers either being drawn in with the vivid colours or repulsed by it. Me, I like them. It looks great on the table, and once familiar with the game, it's very easy to see what occurs where and when. Gifting sages, at least a few, is a must. These provide bonus actions or the sought after resource, but you do get to choose which ones to activate. The base game is great. There's little player interaction aside from stealing creatures and resources, but I thought the worker placement mechanic was fun, and I liked the puzzle elements for a pretty tight game. However, there are so many ways to earn regeneration points, it's not always clear to see who's in the lead. These mainly come from the location of creatures in particular habitats and updating the biome, but also from leftover spirit, the season track, and getting creatures into the borderlands. You'll also lose points if you can't assign a creature from your pen, so this stops you being greedy when taking them. The The solo game is pretty good, using cards to place workers, take ecosystem cards and take points from the biome. It's enjoyable in that I get to think about my actions and play as efficiently as possible, but the difficulty level of the AI just increases the multiplier they get for endgame victory points, so you'll need to find a level that challenges you the most. What I also liked was that water resource is like a wild resource, giving you options if available, where the AI can only spend this as a last resort. Also, as it's quite precious, the track where you claim water from, it generally forces you to lose regeneration points, so be warned. This version of the game comes with a few extra modules. Now, I've not played those enough to give a fair review, but they add extra creature types to the game and overlays for the Sage bonuses to spice things up. There's also a river board with players receiving boat meeples that move along the water, allowing players to gain bonuses from a river sage. Lastly, the Winds of Change cards will introduce random selection of new rules to the game to automatically make villages available, increasing track movement for all players, or keeping bonus tiles on the board that can be activated time and again. I quite liked Arborea. It's whimsical, cosy little thinker of a game, although it does have some random elements. There are some actions that are cleverly linked, but at 4 players the downtime can be a little long between turns. I'm a big fan of worker placement, and I like the fact there's a little twist with the track movement that all players need to be aware of, even if it's not your turn. As the extras are modular, you can add them in any variation, and because of the multitude of bonus tiles, there's quite high replay value. I hope you enjoyed my review, and if you've played, let me know what you think in the comments. This is Ninja Geek Games. Cheers.